I've got business partners. Two examples. I have one who developed a student app for our Job Corps students, and he was doing something VP for his own venture, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to try this. He did it in a tool called Lovable. I'd never heard of the tool until the Monday after the weekend that he started the student app. So it was a quick vetting process, but it was something where let's enable our business, let's move them forward, and where we need to, let's put the constraints on that. So originally, we were comfortable with it being out on the Lovable platform. We're now changing based on how that app is growing.
Lisa, let's start just kind of talk about your career path and trajectory, how you started in technology and how you ended up to where you are now at MTC, which I have always thought was just a fascinating business and business model.
MTC really is fascinating. So maybe we'll get a little bit more into that. But I actually started my career in technology as a child, I would say, and only because my father was a professor, and he would bring home Apple IIe computers from the university, and it just allowed that early introduction for me. And so computers were always something that was available and easy. So when I went to school for my degree, I actually went into management and human resources. And a couple years into school, decided I needed to get out as quickly as possible. And the easiest way out was actually through computer science, but I went into business information systems. So I got my degree in information systems at Utah State. And on graduation, I was hired by Safeco up in the Seattle area as a developer. So I started my career as a COBOL developer way back when.
Okay, so just quickly, Lisa, so are you in, outside of your CIO role, are you in high demand now because there aren't very many COBOL programmers left, or people are calling you to say, you need to fix my airline reservation system or my banking system?
You know what? I guarantee you, if I looked for a COBOL position, I could probably find one because they are still in place today.
It's crazy how much
Difficult to
COBOL
get
there
off
is in the
of.
world.
Yeah, and those babies really process, they just churn stuff out. So, but no, I don't want to go back to my COBOL development days. I actually was on the 5-year track to a CIO when I graduated. That was sort of my goal.
Interesting.
But I don't know if you read Sheryl Sandberg's book. I wrote it down. Women, Work, and the Will to Lead is her book. And what resonated with me in that book was a lot of careers don't follow the traditional ladder. They're more of a jungle gym. And that was me. So I was a developer for 2 years, and I went into management. And then I jumped back out of management into project management, then went into Agile. Scrum was adopted. We were in the area where the individuals who developed Scrum had a strong presence. So I was a Scrum master for a while. I was an Agile coach for a while. And then I went back into management and became a director for a IT division supporting benefits for a company that was sold by Safeco. So my initial was about a 15-year period with Safeco, or that company, Symetra, that was sold by Safeco. So then I was a director, moved back out as a program manager, went back into management. This time I finally stayed in management as a manager, a director, a VP, and then a CIO. So over my 25-ish years, I was all over that jungle gym, but I was having a great time while I was there.
Good for you. So on that career path, what are some of the things you said you had the 5-year plan to be a
Yes.
CIO when you graduated? How did you recognize the right opportunities to take to get where you wanted to be?
I think there are some times where it was recognizing the right opportunity, and I think there were other times where maybe decisions were made from, you know, at the time of my life, maybe the stress level of taking an opportunity. My decision was sort of forced. You know what? I don't need those politics. I don't need that stress at this point in my life. And so if I exit from this and I move over into, so going from manager to project manager, that period, it was a very stressful time for the organization. It was the time when we were being sold. And so for me, I had a family. It just wasn't worth it to me.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah, I would say times where I recognized it was the right thing. A lot of times things fell into place, but there was also the energy around it. There was a good team around it, people that I knew, that I trusted, jumped at those opportunities.
So along this path, what have you enjoyed the most? And then I'll ask the other question, what have you disliked the most?
Um, what I have enjoyed the most always has been the people. I have had a lot of great teams, whether I was part of that team or a leader of that team, either project manager, scrum master, or as a manager, just great people. What I've liked the least, I have never been a fan of politics. And it's not always politics in government. Politics very much plays a role in the workplace as well. And that has been something where I have learned many times to play the game, but it is not my forte. It's not the thing that I want to be doing.
So you're now the CIO at MTC. You've been there a few years, not a really long time. Talk a little bit about what MTC does, because it's a fascinating business, and sort of what you had to, or what you faced. Why did they hire Lisa, and what did they expect you to accomplish? Because you and I have talked about this a bit before. You inherited a lot of stuff going on all at once.
So MTC, first, I'm going to start with their philosophy, which is bionic, and it's believe it or not, I care. And the reason that is the philosophy is because MTC's mission really is about helping the underserved population. So MTC runs Job Corps, which is for youth age 16 to 24 who would otherwise not get an education. So it's a government-run program by the DOL. We are a contractor for Job Corps, and we run those all over the United States. We also run correction facilities, and in those correction facilities, it started because of the education and training component of bringing the inmates education in hopes that they would be able to have a good life after leaving the facility, and hope that they did not return. But MTC runs those facilities end to end. So from the wardens to the cooks to the officers, they're all MTC employees. And when it comes to those facilities or the Job Corps facilities, anytime there are cameras, door locks, officers, technology, whatever it is, that is all MTC that handles that. We also, we recently just received the detention contract in Manston in the United Kingdom, and we also run all detention for Australia. So that is very similar to ICE, which although it's not a very popular thing right now, it's a very political thing right now. We actually run 5 ICE facilities in the United States. And I would love it if everybody could visit an MTC facility and see how we do care about every individual that is there and really want to help them. It's not what is portrayed on the news. It really is. We want to help them get to where they need to be, whether that's back out on the streets here in the States, if it unfortunately is returning them to their home. But we have, going back to the technology, we have rooms in the facilities that we've set up where they're able to meet with their lawyers virtually, where they're able to have their hearing virtually with the courts. So all that technology is in place for them to have secure private areas so that they're able to have all of the resources they need to fight their case.
What did you have to handle when MTC hired you a few years ago? Because when I heard about the role and that you were coming, I thought to myself, I'm glad I'm not Lisa. That sounds like 6 years worth of work to get done in like 3 months.
Yeah. I definitely got on a freight train. I mean, they were on the fast path. So they were in the middle of implementing Oracle Fusion. They had just launched ERP for their finance division in November of 22. I started in December of 22. And they wanted to launch human capital management in January of 23. And it was just like, okay, time out, no way. And so they're like, okay, well, maybe March then. And there's very specific time periods. And so we got them to June of 23 when we were able to launch that. But in addition to that, we launched the workforce platform at the same time. And in launching workforce, we had to have the time clocks in all of our facilities for everybody to be able to clock in and clock out, implemented the biometrics component of that in all of the facilities, and had to have our payroll up and running to pay people. I don't know if you're familiar, but when you're working with state and federal government, if you're not paying people, if you terminate somebody on the day they leave, they need to walk out with a paycheck. So there's no room for error when you're implementing these systems. And that was just some of the big things that we were doing. There was still, the day-to-day and some of the smaller implementations that we were working on. So it really was a freight train that was running, and I was just trying to jump on and not hold on to the brake line and keep it going.
What are some of the lessons you learned during that, so many projects that you would want other CIOs to understand, whether that's, hey, don't implement 10 projects at once, or here's how you manage such a big rollout, like anything you learned that stuck out to you?
Yeah, well, I think there's some things that I learned prior to this that actually helped me in this. And the biggest one is communication and making sure that they understand where you're at and the risks you're undertaking. I have made enough promises in my past where a deadline was missed or a system was implemented and we hid all of the gremlins when we didn't share that they were there. And it just created so much distrust. In this implementation, it really was, and while they weren't a fan of it, coming from a strong Agile background, I did have the project manager implement a daily stand-up. So we met every single day at 4 p.m. and talked through status. And it was a big group, but by having that big group, everybody was hearing the message, everybody was hearing the risks. Unfortunately, and many of us have been in this position where the date was set, we weren't going to miss the date. But as long as we all knew what risk we were undertaking and what challenges we were going to be facing on day one of implementation, we were just better positioned to then handle those challenges. So I would say it was lessons learned prior to that really helped landing here.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's
Thank
a
you.
great point, because if you hide stuff, it's eventually going to be found out anyway, and then
Totally.
you've got to carry that stigma of the loss of trust going
Right.
forward. Yeah,
Right.
It's
Yeah.
really
Big
important.
reputation hit.
Yeah. What does the future look like for MTC? Well, you've been there a few years now. What are kind of in your plans for what the company, what the organization needs going forward, and how does that tie into your AI plans? Just because apparently AI is a thing, and people like to know what others are doing about AI.
Yeah. So MTC continues to diversify. I think we spoke about this when we met once before. We recently opened a hospital in Houston. This hospital is specific to the detainees. So when you would send a detainee off, typically you're sending them to an emergency room. They're checked into the hospital, whether they need that level of care or not. Officers have to go with them. So this provides a facility where we're able to provide that care, control that cost. So we're working with other companies that run facilities, Texas Department of Criminal Justice, so that we are controlling that hospital. We have the officers on the ground so they don't have to send them. We have the transportation. So looking at opportunities like that and supporting our business and making sure that the technology, the infrastructure, and the foundation is there for stuff like that. And that was a partnership venture with a hospital company based in the state of Texas. So continuing to diversify and look at other things that stay along those lines of benefiting those who otherwise wouldn't get those benefits. From an AI perspective, I attended the IT exchange that Valcom put on. That was just a great event. A lot of great things. While I was there, I talked a lot with my best friend Copilot, and I asked, based on what Copilot knows about me in my M365 environment, where is MTC in comparison to others on the AI journey? And we're actually in a good place. We do have an AI governance committee. We have standard operating procedures. We have a path for approval for AI tools. So we're headed down the road. We have places to continue to mature, really putting together and firming up our strategy, making sure that, we're not, I don't want to keep people from moving forward, but recognizing we have to keep people secure, and we can't let our data be out there for our competitors to use to their benefit. So how do we make sure that we're controlling that? But I've got business partners, 2 examples. I have one who developed a student app for our Job Corps students. And he was doing something VP for his own venture. And he's like, you know what? I'm just going to try this. He did it in a tool called Lovable. I'd never heard of the tool until the Monday after the weekend that he started the student app. So it was a quick vetting process, but it was something where let's enable our business, let's move them forward, and where we need to, let's put the constraints on that. So originally, we were comfortable with it being out on the Lovable platform. We're now changing based on how that app is growing. We're going to bring it into our environment, put more security around it so that we can protect that data better. And, it's something where they feel like we're letting them move forward, and we still feel like from a security and an infrastructure perspective that we're doing our job in protecting our business.
Really insightful. I was just thinking, after she said he did the Lovable app and he created this, then we had to shut him down. But I loved how you transferred it to, we enabled him and then we pivoted to something more secure. That just seems like, from an executive side, I'm like, oh, that's a great CIO. That's a great plan. As you've set up, and I think it's really wise, and I think a lot of a lot of CIOs are trying to figure out, how do I balance the business moving forward quickly and the risks of AI, the shadow IT, now I want to hook up all my data to all these things. How have you thought about the AI governance committee that you've set up, or pathway for approval that you would share with a CIO that hasn't gone through that journey yet? Because you've gone through that's a difficult thing to balance. Any lessons or thoughts around how to do that?
For me, when we initially set it up, we really wanted to make sure that, of course, we had the IT component and the security component that I bring. Unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I operate as the CISO. I have had a lot of experience. My background was in financial services and healthcare, and I have dealt with breaches in the past. I learned a lot of great lessons from that. So that's what I bring to the committee. Also included our VP of legal, just to make sure from a legal and compliance perspective that we always had that mindset and thought process. And then we brought on a couple of individuals who were really forward thinking in wanting to move forward with AI. So that here we've got a couple of conservative individuals on here, but we have also got a couple of individuals who would run as fast as we would let them run, if we'd let them run. And we intentionally kept it a little bit smaller. And we've talked a little bit about, do we extend this? Do we have a strategy committee that is different than this, so that the strategy is one thing and then the governance just makes sure that we're letting strategy run but keeping the guardrails around it. But for now, we've kept it to that 4 individuals, and it's worked really well. I'm about to bring an intern on. That intern is going to complete the poorly built SharePoint site that I've started. And part of that, what I'm hoping, is that we're using AI to build automation around approval, so that not everything comes into the governance, but here are the different things that I do when things come in, where we could just provide automatic approvals, especially if they're already on the approval list. So having that, and then if for some reason it doesn't meet one of those guides, it kicks it out to the committee. And again, it's just, how do we keep this thing moving, keep ideas generating? I've also learned, and this came out of the exchange, or my research after the exchange, was ISO 42001 has been put into place around AI, and it talks about your AI list and the risk register, and making sure that anytime you're implementing AI as a company, you're also assigning a risk, so that if you were ever audited, you could show that. So building those out as well, I think, are going to be core, whether you're a company that's going to be audited or not, just so that, again, you're enabling your business, but you also have an understanding of everything that is out there. And if at any time something does happen out there in the world, as inevitably it will, you're able to go back and quickly assess whether or not you're going to be impacted.
I love that. Thank you.
What about your team? The reason I ask is I've known members of your team for as long as they've been alive. You talked about the teams you've loved, the teams you've loved. What types of things are you doing to develop your team, especially around AI, going forward?
That's a great question. And I have a great team. I have a small team. That was one of the challenges when I was in my final interview with MTC. I asked, what does my team look like? What is that dynamic? And for an organization at the time that had roughly 8,000 employees, I had about 25 IT team members. That's what I said, Mike.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. I have crossed the 30 mark. At this point, it's a rather small team, though, for an organization this size. Um, my 3 directors all have well over 30 years of tenure with MTC. And so there's harnessing the benefits of that tenure, and there's prying their fingers off of those things that they're clinging to because of that tenure. And I think part of that goes to AI and, the traditional way that things have been done, and the fact that they are very, in this industry especially, very security minded. And so how do you not immediately, when your VP gets you on the phone and tells you they've built a lovable app, how do you keep your directors, calm, and not jumping into, oh my word, we got to pull it down, because you want to create that positive relationship. You want to show that you're not going to be the barrier to technology moving forward. And so it really has been a balancing act. And I think a big component of that is me leading forward. And so I tell my team it shouldn't be a no, it should be a yes and. And so it comes back to that very thing. Yes, we're going to enable it, and this is how we're going to do it, so that they know we are going to secure you, we are going to help you move forward, we are going to, but we might put a few of our own little things in there just to make sure that, you're secure, or that, we can keep some of those guardrails in place.
Now, here you are. You've achieved your 5-year goal many years later. Actually, you achieved it much earlier because you were a CIO before you got to MTC. If somebody came to you and said, I'd like to become a CIO, what advice would you give them? How does somebody become a successful CIO in your mind? What do you think it took from you? I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
I really think one of the biggest components for me was the relationships that I had with the business, and making sure that I understood the business. And I had times that people would question why I was getting maybe a business certification or a designation. But when I came into MTC, I didn't know this business. My 3rd day, I traveled to what we call the Oteros in New Mexico. One is a corrections facility, one is a detention facility. And boy, were my eyes wide open during those facility tours. And I learned quickly that I was going to need to learn this business so that I could support them to my best ability. And that really has, I think, been how I've moved forward. I've never taken a job where I haven't been seeked out. And I think it's because of that very thing. So I was with Safeco Symetra for 15 years. And the reason I left is because we had implemented a vendor platform, and that vendor was so impressed with that implementation, they offered me a position. And so it's things like that, but they wouldn't have been impressed if they wouldn't have seen that I was a technologist who really understood my business. And then that next position learned my business. I was a technologist who really understood my business, and that carried me forward from financial services into healthcare. And so I think that really was key to me ultimately becoming a CIO. And just having a reputation of being able to move a company forward. And MTC didn't know me, you know, but I think that when I sat down with them and had the conversations with them and talked about my career, that they were able to see that.
It's a great insight that we support a business and we have to understand what drives that business. And yeah, that's an amazing insight. So thanks. Anything else you'd like to share? Thinking that, you know, it'll be people like young Niel Nickolaisen and young Lisa Gardner and maybe middle-aged Niel Nickolaisen and still young Lisa Gardner that are listening to this podcast. Any other thoughts you have on your career, your role that you'd like to share?
I would say the only other thing maybe that I would like to share is that when I started my original 5-year path, what a manager or a CIO was to me at that time is very different than what it is now. And I do think it was agile and that the methodology and the practices behind it. But servant leadership really is my foundation. And I truly believe that individuals who are healthy and happy in their position make great teams. And when you have great teams, they develop or implement great products. And when you're doing that, you're supporting your business, which means you're supporting your customers. And so if you are bringing that servant leadership and making sure that every individual has what they need to be successful, your business is going to be successful and your customers are going to be happy.
I was wondering how you could support 8,000 people with that size of team, and you kind of answered it there as far as build a culture, servant leadership. I have so many questions about how do you really manage that many end users or a company of that size with that size of team? Any other lessons you've learned? Because I know everyone, all the technologists and all the IT leaders, they feel this, I don't have enough people, I don't have enough resources to get everything done. How do you think about that? What lessons have you learned or strategies you've implemented to deal with those constraints?
It really comes down to priorities, right? And if you make a commitment, meet your commitment. So for me, you've got a number of priorities. And when I have individuals come to me stressed, what are the priorities? What is business looking for? And draw your line. I don't want you to exhaust yourself. I don't want you to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And we just need to communicate back. And if they need me to run cover to communicate back, that's what it is. And then if we truly need more, that gives me the argument, if you will, or the conversation points, maybe better, to go have the conversation that if you want us to go further down this priority list, here are the resources that we need in order to do that. And so we have done staff augmentation on various things in order to do that. We have not gotten to some of the priorities on the list, but the team understands where I'm at, the business understands where I'm at, and people have exhibited patience because of that. And so we do the best that we can, we communicate where we're at, and we just keep moving forward.
And I think part of that too is the trust and credibility you've built when you say we're full, that they know not only are you full, but that you're really good at what you do. So that it's not like, hey, well, if you're not very good at this stuff, which means if you got better at it, we have more capacity, because the organization knows you're really good at what you do, you and your team. So they trust you when you say we're full.
Yeah. And I've only heard positive things about my team. People do not complain about this team.
Throughout your career, any crazy implementations you're like, that was so bad, or then lessons you learned from that, or any like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done that technology or worked in that area? Anything like that come to mind? Any disasters? Want to share?
Well, I will say that we did shove a system in far quicker than we should have in my past. And the business paid for it for years after the fact, with workarounds and, finagling data. And I think ultimately it was we've got to get off of this system. But if we had taken the time and were allowed to do it right, I think they would have been happy with the system. But it truly was a date-driven, make it happen, and it was not communicated what the outcomes were going to be after the fact. And so every day was just a mad scramble, long days for both business and tech, and it was a disaster.
Is that the leadership that's pushing that, hey, we have to have this done by May 1st, and you say, no, that's not a good idea, and they're like, do it anyway, we'll deal with the consequences? Is
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Sometimes no matter how firm you stand, you're still not top dog and you do what you're asked.
Which is so fascinating because I think a lot of times the risks aren't communicated well. And so it's like, hey, go do this. Yeah, we know it's going to be risky, but we're willing to take that on. Well, the risks are you're going to spend 3 times as much and rip out the system in 3 years. Like that's happened. And so it's interesting how that experience has played into kind of a theme along your career of communicate, 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 so that doesn't happen again. I think everyone's had a similar thing. I love this conversation, Lisa, and thank you so much. I just wrote notes and things that we've talked about, like how to do global rollouts, how to manage a team that has so many locations and manages so many locations, from hospitals to prisons, and I can't imagine the stress.
These are kind of high stakes.
Yeah,
location.
high stakes, secure, and with a
Not
small
like it's
team.
you're selling brownies somewhere in Texas.
I think of the partnerships, the politics, the team dynamics that you've discussed, setting up AI governance, and a pathway to implementation. When you said that, I thought, oh, everyone wants to implement AI. Everyone's trying to do it fast, but getting a pathway to approval and automating approval, I think, is a really, really important insight, and really appreciate your thoughts and insight into here. Any other things you'd want to tell a CIO of any other lessons that you're like, hey, this has really helped me in my career, just this 1 or 2 bits of advice or lessons learned?
I think I've always just been myself. And I think people should just be there, be who you are at every level. I think sometimes people pretend to be something that they're not. And I think it's important to always just hold on to who you are. Don't polish something up. I know that one of the reasons MTC was impressed with me is because when I interviewed, it was a conversation. It didn't feel like a Q&A session or and I think that was part of it. And it's just who I am as an individual. So that's what I encourage. And at a CIO level, people are like, are you kidding? Like, that's a terrible piece of advice. But I think at every level, people need to be who they are.
I love that. It disarms the politics as well, right? Like you're just, this is what it is. This is who I am. I love that thought.
Thanks, Lisa. You remain one of my heroes, having done what you've done at MTC. So we really appreciate your helping us with this podcast and the thought you've shared, and we look forward to learning from you as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.